All right, welcome to Little Pod That Could. My guest today is Matt Cox. Matt, thanks for being here today.
Absolutely, Kevin. I appreciate you reaching out and inviting me.
And you're the host. I noticed you because we have a similar guest. You and I both have interviewed Kyle Atkinson. And so I think he posted about us, what is this podcast? And so I looked it up, and then actually as I was kind of digging, I don't know if you remember, so you said you went to South, and you played, I'm pretty sure I coached against you when you were a freshman. I was at McKay, and I'm almost positive either as a freshman or a sophomore that my team played your team.
No, when we were texting off air, and I didn't know what you looked like yet, and you said that I wasn't sure, but yeah, were you the head freshman coach?
I was.
Yeah, no, I totally recognize you now that I have the visual. So okay, yeah, freshman basketball, good times.
Yeah. Okay, so anyway, we'll get into that. We were just talking before we got started, like we should just get started talking about this. I want to talk about your podcast. I also want to talk about podcasting in general because I do feel like there's a huge movement right now. We were talking about Gary Vee, but there's like a lot of influencers like, you need to have a podcast, But like the reality of starting a podcast and like continuing a podcast it's pretty difficult. And I kind of wanted to hear your perspective on that as well. How long have you been doing your podcast?
Yeah, so mine started back, I think, so I'll go back kind of to the origins. So I am in a fantasy football league with a bunch of Salem guys. And I have to give credit where it's due.
Yeah, do you want to shout out the league?
Yeah, shout out to the League of Dons. A couple guys from Salem, Eric Gunderson and Colin Cassad, actually started doing a podcast centered around the fantasy football league. So it wasn't made public. It was just the guys in the league would listen to it, and they'd talk about the week's matchups and all that stuff. Anyway, it transitioned. Cool. Yeah, so eventually I became the host of that. And so I did continue doing the fantasy football pod. But then it transitioned some more, and I started, rather than just talking about the league, I started actually interviewing people. And it started off, I had Ryan Allen on, who's my friend from way back and is from the Salem area, won 3 Super Bowls with the Patriots. And I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, I kind of like this. And it was still called the League of Dons podcast at that time. So then I had Ryan on. I think the next one I had Xavier Canifax, who was a really good. You probably remember Xavier from freshman basketball. Yeah. I think he got moved up pretty quick to JV freshman year because he was really good. But had him on, talked all about he's been playing ball in Europe. So it kind of took off from there. I think I officially transitioned it from the League of Dons podcast to the Saucetown Stories podcast, probably sometime right after the new year. And from there, I've just been bringing on people who are either, doing cool or interesting things, sort of local celebrities, or just people that I'm friends with who are, they're also up to cool or interesting things. But it's, you mentioned Kyle. It's cool that we were able to connect because Kyle shared the podcast after he was on.
Yeah, shout out to Kyle.
Shout out to Kyle Atkinson, great guy. Right. So those are the origins, and like you said, I mean, one of the biggest things that I've been trying to do is just to stay consistent with it. I mean, there's been spurts where I didn't record one for 3-4 weeks, but trying to be super consistent now and do minimum 1 a week, and lately I've even been doing 2 sometimes.
Dang. And that doesn't sound like much, but like to people that podcast, like I hadn't done one in probably a month. And it is kind of encouraging because if you look at the statistics, there's something like 900,000 podcasts or something, but something like 70% of them haven't posted in the last 3 months. So like to continue being consistent is pretty tough. Oh shoot, did I lose you? Oh, there we go. Okay. So when exactly though did you start? How long have you been doing it? Because I've been doing it for like, I think almost 2.5 years now.
Yeah, so I took over the League of Dons podcast probably, I think it was it the beginning of last football season, or was it
Okay.
the year before? Whenever it was, but I was, if it was the year before, I was only doing it during football. But this was the
Okay.
year where I took it over, and then it transitioned into this Saucetown Stories thing, which I've been doing for about
Yeah, and why
since
did you settle
January, or no,
on?
excuse me, since November.
Okay, and why did you settle on telling stories people from Salem? Because you don't even live in Salem anymore, right?
Right, I'm up here in Portland.
Okay.
I still, I grew up, I grew up in Salem. I was born in Seattle, but moved to Salem when I was 5 years old. My parents still live there. Um, I definitely refer to Salem as home. I identify with the area. I'm down there all the time. So I really, and you've probably, Kevin, I know we were talking a little bit off air about this. I know a huge thing in podcasting is you got to be, there's 900,000 of them out there, right? So you got to be really, really niche with what you do. Um, if I start another NFL podcast, there's probably 3,000 of those out there. If I
For
do
sure.
a podcast about movies, there's probably 3,000 of those out there. But there's nobody doing a podcast, well, except yourself, I should say. But there's not a lot of people doing podcasts where they're interviewing people from the Salem area. And more than anything, it was, I don't have huge aspirations of like monetizing it or anything. Of course,
Sure.
I'd be stoked if I woke up tomorrow and had 20,000 subscribers. But
Sure.
with that said, it's more that I enjoy it. I think there's a lot of cool stories, just of stuff that people from Salem are doing that a lot of people had no idea about, that I had no idea about. And it's gotten to the point where enough people know about it that I'll have people reach out to me and tell me stuff. Hey, do you know so and so? Look, this is what he or she is doing. You should have them on. And it's stuff I never would have known, people I never would have met if I hadn't started doing this.
Yeah. And see, I kind of took the opposite approach. I didn't want to niche down, and I don't just talk to people from Salem. And I guess, like, for me, I understood that strategy, and that definitely makes sense if you're going to, like, I mean, if you want to try to monetize and actually create a set audience, it probably is best to niche down and reach for, like, a specific set. But for me, I had to do things that I was interested in, so it was like, I, too, don't have, like, I don't have illusions that I'm going to be the next Joe Rogan. I just, like you, enjoy it. I think it's fun. I think it's cool. And so, I'm just doing it. Obviously, if someone wants to sponsor it, I'm not going to say no either. But what's the most difficult part? Because I do think there are some people, I've talked to people that are thinking about starting podcasts, especially like small businesses, stuff like that. What would you say the hardest part is that you didn't expect going in?
The hardest part, I would say, is just the consistency. I mean, I really enjoy doing it, but it's also easy, and I've done it before. To 1 week, just say, oh, I don't feel like it. I'm not gonna put in the effort to schedule these guests. That's one piece of it. The other that I don't do a good enough job of. We were talking about this before we hopped on. The production value, the editing, that's some of the stuff that can take you to the next level. I have not. I'm getting better at that portion of it. But I mean, people that do these, that have big time podcasts. I mean, they've hired production people. They don't even do it themselves. They've hired
Oh
professional
yeah,
production people
I
to
had
do it.
Mike Gioseffi on, who's the host of Sports Card Nonsense on The Ringer, and he said they basically just record stuff, and Spotify does all the back end stuff. They literally just create
Oh,
the
wow.
content, and Spotify does all of the back end. So,
And he's paid by Spotify, right? Like he has a contract, so they're just like, here, go do your thing, and we'll take care
Yep.
of all the rest of this stuff.
yeah,
Right? Yeah.
exactly. I think he might actually. I don't know. It is a Spotify original, but they're under the Ringer. So I don't know if the Ringer's writing the checks or Spotify's writing the checks, but someone is in that universe is writing checks and then doing the back end for them.
Yeah, I heard that guy on. He was on Bill Simmons, I think, the
Yep.
other week.
He was.
Yeah, that's cool. You got him on there.
Yeah, he was great. He was awesome. We talked sports cards, but like when he said that, I was like, man, that would be. I'm lucky enough to have someone edit the video side of it for me, which is a huge like. I couldn't. This program that I'm using right now has a feature where you can just basically press a button and it will take the two video feeds, put them together, and upload it. But my guy does like graphics and like if I want to insert pictures, if we're talking about social media people that I know people probably don't know what they look like, we'll put pictures and stuff in. He does all that. So, and it makes a huge difference. It makes it look so much better. But, beforehand I was just hitting the button, uploading it. That wasn't bad either. It was still better than nothing, I guess.
Right. Let me ask you a question. What's your strategy for getting guests on? Like, what did you? What's his name from the sports card show? Did you just slide in his DMs, or did you? What did you do?
Yeah, I did. So my thought with him was, let me get him early before they get big. It's the same thing. I was talking to my friend at work today, and we were talking about the Olympics, and I was saying, I bet I could probably get the American dude that won the air rifle gold. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because no one knows who that guy is, but he is a gold medalist, So it's like my strategy is always – so the biggest guest that I've probably had, the most famous, is probably Casey Jost, who's like one of the head producers on Impractical Jokers. Mm-hmm. He's on camera a lot. He does like the interview stuff for their behind-the-scenes stuff. Anyway, he's probably – and he's Colin Jost's brother, which is also one of the reasons he's famous. But yeah, I just DM'd him. I look for people that are like not super famous, but like sort of attached to. So I didn't get David Dobrik, but I got David Dobrik's high school best friend. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Which is still a really interesting conversation because we're talking about what is it like to exist in this crazy world where David Dobrik's getting billions of views and then also come back and work your mortgage job. So. But my strategy for guests, I don't really have a set strategy other than I try to get people that I think are probably not getting blown up, but I think would be really interesting to talk to.
Yeah, it's been weird for me, or I don't know if weird is the word, but some of the people who I've gotten, and I won't name names because I don't want to put anybody on blast or whatever, but some of the people that I've gotten who are quote-unquote famous, those episodes haven't done as well as just some people that
it's
are like
crazy, right?
Friends.
Yes. Yeah, and I think a lot of that has to do with what they do. So if you have someone that has a huge audience on, like Casey Jost, he had 30,000 Instagram followers, but he didn't share it, so his episode didn't do that great. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it kind of. Whereas I had Rebecca Donaldson on, who's the realtor, you see all her billboards around town. Hers crushed. Because she understands social media. She shared it. She made a big deal out of it. And, it was my best listened to episode. And she also got a deal from a couple moving from Florida. They bought their house from her because they listened to the podcast. So it's like, it's crazy because there is inherent benefit to it. Like when you interview someone, you interviewed that coach. I listened to part of that today. You interviewed him like, you basically created content for him. You know what I mean? Like, if he had aspirations to be a college coach or whatever, like, you've now established him as an expert in his field because you interviewed him on your podcast.
Yeah, it's all, so much of the world now is whether you like it or not, is about marketing yourself and having a brand. And it's so much stuff is about name recognition. It's funny you mentioned the realtor. Sorry, I'm blanking on her name.
Rebecca Donaldson.
Rebecca. That's huge. So I do, aside obviously from the podcast, because I'm not making that Joe Rogan bag yet. Off the pod. Right. I do some other stuff. But I work in real estate as well. That's huge in the real estate world. Like I've heard people. They don't care about the podcast itself making money. It's like it's a way to get deal flow for realtors or investors. People say, "Oh, that's the guy, that's the gal from the podcast. They seem cool. They know what they're talking about. I should contact them." That stuff's huge.
And it's weird to me that people are still kind of slow to understand that. Like, I mean, I'm thinking, man, we just did this interview where you looked awesome. Like, why would you not share that everywhere, clip that? Like, we just made an hour's worth of content. Like, you could cut 5 pieces of you sounding really smart, put them on TikTok or Instagram or whatever. It's just crazy to me that, you do it. And then maybe it's because, if you have somebody super famous on, they think, oh, well, what's your following? A couple hundred on your Instagram. I have, 50,000. But I don't know. If the right people are listening, the numbers don't matter, I guess. But anyway.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I don't know about you, but I'm whoever I have on, I'm pretty shameless about asking them to share it with their followers as well.
Oh, interesting.
I'll ask them to share it. And if they don't, I mean, I'll usually say like, hey, no pressure, but if you're so inclined, it would be awesome if you could share the episode.
Interesting. I don't do that just because I was like, I mean, maybe because at first it was like begging people just to come on. You know what I mean? It's like, so yeah, I'm still kind of hesitant to do that because I don't know. Honestly, I feel like, man, they should be super stoked to share it anyway, but kind of is what it is.
Yeah, that'd be my hope. I mean, most local people that I have that don't have massive Instagram followings, they just I tag them in the podcast and they reshare it without me even saying anything. But there's been a few where I ask people like, hey, would you be down to share this? And they're usually cool with it. Granted, most of them, actually the guy with the most followers I've ever had on. Is from Salem. You probably say is AJ LaPre. I can't remember how many. He's got actually more so than Instagram. He's got a bunch. He's got almost 1 million YouTube followers.
Right.
But he shared it on his Instagram and it was cool. And that, and he was an awesome guest too. I loved having him on.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing I've noticed too is people that are like doing content creation in some way are way better guests. And I'm not trying to like say anything, but like when I message someone like, oh, this is the first podcast I've ever been on, I'm always like, oh, it's like this will be a little rougher. People that make content already, like AJ, I mean, he's used to being recorded, he's used to being on camera and on audio, so it's not a big deal. And so like he doesn't think, because a lot of times good guests will like think too much about, well, how do I sound? Am I saying the right things? And they get in their own way, where someone like AJ's been on camera enough that it's just natural for him now,
Yeah, and he's got a personality and he's used to all that. It was funny though. I hope AJ doesn't mind me sharing this, but he was like, after we got done with it, he's like, oh, I'm always so nervous on podcasts, and I'm like, dude, you do not sound nervous. You're good at this stuff. But the other thing I'll tell you is I love coming on other people's podcasts. This is the second one I've done, and it feels like so. Compared to having to, like when I have guests on, I'm prepping questions. There's some homework that goes into it. It's like coming on somebody else's pod after doing that feels so like low pressure, being the guest instead of the host.
See, so I have been kind of going back and forth with how I do that. At first, I was like scripting the questions. Like if you listen to the one I did with Kyle, I had the questions written out and I actually sent them to him. So in the middle of answering one of the questions, he's like, oh, wait, I should wait to talk about that because you're going to ask me about that later. And I was like, it was like record scratch, like, I was like, oh, man, I do not want that. So I've kind of come to the conclusion where I'm just like, you know what? Like, if Matt and I went to lunch, what would we talk about like this? You know what I mean? Like, I try to know a little bit about what you're doing, but I also want to just kind of find out and explore. You know what I mean?
No, I'm with you. I don't send people scripts before, questions before. I might send them. Sometimes I'll send a brief outline. Like there's always a certain format. I have people introduce themselves and kind of talk about their Salem ties, just because it's the Salem, Saucetown Stories pod. Sure. But I leave it open ended. I'll have some stuff written down. So like, okay, if there's a lull in the conversation, I'm not like, oh, so what did you do last weekend type thing. So I'll be prepared for it. But yeah, I try to not make it super rigid. I mean, there's certain people, like I had Nancy Marshall on a few weeks ago. That one I structured more just because she has done so much cool stuff in her life, and I was like, we have to cover these things. But if it's my friend or somebody like that, who, no offense to my friends, but you haven't accomplished as much as Nancy has,
right.
then it's, I'll leave it much more casual, open-ended.
Well, yeah, and that's what, because, I was listening to podcasts. I think I've been listening to Rogan for, probably about 10 years. I was listening to him when you had to explain what podcasts were to people. And, the thing I think that was so attractive about those early on was that it seemed like a conversation they were just recording. It was so different from, the late night 7 minutes and then we kicked a break. It was like they were talking about real things. I was like, wow, this is crazy. So I think that's where I've kind of settled, and I've done a bunch of different stuff, like pre-plan the questions, just have an idea, go and totally wing it. Now at this point, I have a structure in my head too. I'm going to, usually ask people to introduce themselves, although with you, we just kind of jumped into it. But I don't know. I like more of the free-flowing format. I think for me, it works better.
No, I'm with you. For the most part, there's plenty of places we can go to get that rigid structure, and I think that's one of the best things about the podcast medium is it's pretty it's just raw and uncut. It's a conversation. Like you said, we were talking off air and we're like, dude, should we just start this thing? This is the same stuff we're gonna, and we basically just kept the conversation going into the podcast.
Yeah. And I guess that's the thing for me too. If the podcast ended tomorrow, I feel like that's okay. I learned a ton of stuff. I'm a way better conversationalist. I'm probably a better question asker and probably more empathetic. I understand technology a little bit better. So there are some positives. What kinds of things have you noticed? Have you noticed anything about your communication style, or as a podcast, helped you learn anything new?
Yeah, the number one thing for me that I would describe as a benefit from it is I've connected with some people that I never probably would have got the chance to meet or know. I've also reconnected with friends that maybe I hadn't talked to in 5-10 years. That's the biggest thing for me. But I think the number one deal with, and I don't want to, I'm admittedly not great at this by any means. I like to think I'm okay at it. But the number one thing is just I'm genuinely interested in people's stories. It's not an act. I'm asking people questions because I want to know. I want to hear what was that like. I keep going back to Nancy. I want to know what was it like at Munich in the '72 Olympics. I talked to Xavier. You're playing pro basketball in Kosovo. You're living in what's that setup like? So for me, it's easy to ask people stuff and to interview people because I genuinely want to know the questions, and it's not it never feels like, oh, I'm checking a box, I better ask them about this. It's just stuff I genuinely care about and want to know.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I forgot to ask you. You asked me what my guest strategy is. What's your guest strategy?
Yeah, so early on, it was more of me reaching out to people. These days, it's more, it's kind of flowed naturally. Just stuff happens where somebody will text me oh, really enjoyed the episode with so-and-so. And I'm like, oh, you're an interesting person. Would you want to come on the podcast? Or, the most recent one with Coach Riley, he texted Kyle and I, because Kyle I shouldn't say Kyle, more so I cracked a joke at his expense on the podcast.
I heard.
He was talking trash to us.
I was going to try to get the text message. I was going to try to do a little investigation, see if I could get you to give me what the text message said, but it sounded like it's not something that we should be putting on the pod.
I don't know if your pod is G-rated or can we cuss?
Oh no. Yeah, this podcast people can cuss on for sure.
Oh, he. So I cracked a joke about how Coach Riley is he's not a technology guy. He probably doesn't have an iPhone, and he's probably never heard any of these. And he listened to it, and
Uh-huh.
he group texted Kyle and I. He goes, "I do have an iPhone, you fucks." He texted us that, and then we were cracking up, and he's like, "No, great episode." And then I was like, "Well, I got to get you on here. Like this Salem community loves you." South Salem loves you, and he's one of my buddies too. So I was like, so
Cool.
that's kind of how stuff has happened more so. When you asked me about guests recently, especially, things have kind of come about naturally like that more so than me.
Well, and that's good. Like, I don't
Uh,
have that. I'm still definitely begging people to come on the podcast. So the fact that you have people wanting to come on yours says that you're probably making progress. That's good.
well, I was stoked that you invited me for what it's worth. This is cool that you're doing this. I wasn't familiar with your pod until you reached out.
You're not the only one. There's plenty of people not familiar with my pod, but that's all right. That's all right. So, yeah. What's the plan for the pod in the future? Like, what are you trying to do with it? Where do you want it to go? What are you hoping for?
Man, so like I said, I'd be stoked if I woke up tomorrow and had 10,000 subscribers. Is that really the driving force behind it? I don't think so. I mean, early on, I definitely made more of an effort to get quote unquote famous people on it. These days, I more so enjoy it. I would for sure like to get more listeners. I think it's interesting. I think it's cool. I think people enjoy it. So I definitely want to build a larger listener base with it. I try, I mean, and you can probably relate. Of course, I look at my numbers. I try not to get too hung up on that. I try to just focus on um, the biggest thing for me and to be is I try to be respectful of people's time, and I feel like I owe it to them if they're coming on that I need to be prepared. I need, I can't be like leaning on them to bring something to the table. I need to know about their life. I need to have some stuff prepared to talk to
Sure.
them about and have them have a positive experience. So that's what I try to focus on. Of course, I want the numbers to take off. Anybody would, though.
Yeah. Huh. And that's a weird thing too, because the numbers are, it's like you have no numbers until you don't. You know what I mean? It's like, like Ninja, when he was streaming, he'd have, 10 people watching. And then once he went viral, same thing, actually, AJ, if you look at the origin of
Yeah.
AJ, he was doing a ton of YouTube stuff prior to his viral video where he, essentially just wore a wetsuit and played hoops in Venice. It's like, but that video took off and got, a couple million views, and that's what pushed him into the stratosphere, but that wasn't like the first time he was making content. He was making content for a while before that. And so it's weird because, like the things that take off, same thing with like Grayson, like the Spider-Man thing was like just a thing him and his friend decided to do. And then that, he had some shine from N1 before that, but that's what pushed him into the YouTube stratosphere. And it's like just one thing, one good episode could be what pushes you into the next thing, to the next tier.
Yeah. Yeah, that you get one big one that gets you, and it's just consistency too. I mean,
Yeah.
people want instant gratification with everything, and the stuff where you do a podcast for 2 months, you go, oh no one's, it's not where I want it to be yet, and it's like it can take years, or it may never happen. And so
Yes.
you
Right.
gotta be okay with that too. I mean, to use the AJ example, we talked about this on his podcast. There's like this idea with influencers and content creators, and I've been guilty of it in the past too. There's like this idea that it's just, oh, he just like AJ, he just like throws stuff on YouTube, and that's not a real job. Like, it's like, no, this guy built this thing for multiple years. He still, to this day, he told me when he puts out one of those videos, it's usually 8 hours of editing, and I mean,
Right.
it is a full-time job. and people that have built something like that deserve a ton of credit because it did, unless you're, Kendall Jenner or whatever. But I mean, your average person to build something like that, it does not happen overnight.
Right. Well, and even with Kendall Jenner, like, I mean, there's lots of other famous people that didn't leverage social media as smartly as they did. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
she has 1 billion followers. Will Smith doesn't have that. You know what I mean? And there's a bunch of celebrities you could say have, bigger regular platforms, but haven't been able to leverage the power of social media the way they have. So, I mean, I think anybody that's able to break through deserves some kind of credit, But it is.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's the whole concept of like maybe you were born on third base, but you still have to run home, or you're born on second, you still got to run home. So that there's people that are as famous, to use the Kendall example again, there's people that are as famous as her, and they're not leveraging social media in the same way. So it's, to your point, even people that were already celebrities, they deserve credit for that stuff as well.
Yeah, and when I was talking to David Dobrik's buddy, that's what he said. Because the crazy thing is Dobrik was at his height putting out 3 vlogs a week, which is insane. But he said, like when he would go see him in that time, like all he was doing was filming and editing. Like there was no downtime, which I think now that he's back making content, he's one vlog a week. I think he realized like that pace was just unsustainable. Which I've even felt, like with all the stuff I have going on, and the summer seems to be harder to get guests. Have you noticed that?
I mean, I've done okay just because I've been mostly having friends and stuff on lately.
Okay.
I'm sure if I was casting a wider net to, more celebrity types, I can imagine it would be much, much more difficult.
And I was like big into like, okay, consistent. And then like I said, it's been like a month. I was like looking for stuff to get ready for the pod. I'm like, where's the mic? But like I've kind of become okay with, I need to do it at a pace that I still enjoy it, that it's not too stressful, right, that it's not something, where it's like, oh, I have to do this. I still want to enjoy it, regardless of whether, it's making money or is gaining followers or whatever. Like if I don't enjoy it, I'm not going to want to do it, even if it was making money and had a lot of followers.
No, that's 100% right. If you burn yourself out on it, that's the worst thing you can do, is burn yourself out on it. Particularly, like you said, even if it's making money, but particularly when it's not making money, you have to enjoy it to a certain degree. I could not agree more on that. By the way, I feel like I should distinguish. I'm not drinking White Russians in the middle of the day or anything. This is a cold brew that I just downed.
We would not be judging you if you were. This is do you. Okay, so now that we've gone over the podcast, maybe a little bit about you. I know you said you played college baseball. I didn't know that. Where did you play? When did you graduate?
Yeah, so I graduated from South Salem in 2008, okay. And then I went and played ball at University of Puget Sound, which is in Tacoma, Washington. Yeah, played there for 4 years. Was lucky enough to start for 4 years, and wow. That was kind of the end of my baseball career. Though I wasn't going to the majors or anything like that. But yeah, I played some ball.
Okay. So now what are you into? You podcast, work, but what else, like, do you do, like, any other cool hobbies, or is there anything cool that you've done recently, or?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm into, I have my W-2 job. I also run my own business in real estate, which I actually really enjoy that. It's weird, people say find something that you can get paid to do that you enjoy, and I feel like I've found that niche a little bit with that. As far as like just straight hobbies, I mean, I love traveling, especially international travel, which has obviously been a bit of a bummer the last year or so, year and a half.
Where's the coolest place you've been?
Ooh, okay, that's a good question. I ask all my guests that because I'm a travel junkie and I always want recommendations. Okay. Let me give you a couple. Okay.
Okay.
I'll do kind of categories. I've actually thought about this question before for some reason.
Because you like to travel. Okay.
Yeah. So coolest, most like vibrant, like happening nightlife city, Berlin, Germany, for sure. But Berlin, Germany, or Buenos Aires, Argentina, those two. Coolest like beach location, I would say, is Tel Aviv on the Mediterranean.
Interesting.
And then I'll give you one more, Japan for culinary stuff. If you like food, like I did, speaking of hobbies, I love trying new food. Japan is another level as far as food goes.
See, and I was going to ask you what place had the best food, but so you're saying Japan, hands down.
Yes, go there. The ramen. Oh my god, I would give anything to go back there and have a bowl of ramen right now.
Okay, interesting. All right, now back to you. See, you brought up some stuff. Now I was thinking some other questions. So, is your W-2 job is it a real estate job as well?
No, so my W-2, I work in sales at a company called Cerium, located in downtown Portland. So I sell, and this is always the part where people are like, what the heck does that mean? I sell flight and aviation data to airports.
Okay.
The short version of it, I'll give you an example, is airports use our data to bring new flights to their city. So, for example, PDX just got a direct flight to Seoul, South Korea, which was a huge deal. So they'll use our data to show things, basically use different metrics to show airlines. This one happened to be with Delta, to show airlines why you should add this route and why it will be successful if you bring it to our city. That's kind of the short version of what I do is my W-2 job.
Okay. And did you want to shout out the real estate job? What do you do with that?
Yeah, so real estate, I do a lot of stuff. Actually, my last W-2 was in real estate. That's how I sort of got into it. But I've been doing, especially since COVID started, I've been doing more investment stuff. I buy semi-beat-up houses, I fix them up, and I turn them into rental properties.
Now, are you doing the work yourself?
No, I mean, okay. I'm full disclosure, I'm not a handyman, so I typically hire people who are better at it than me to do it, because if I did it, the house would probably fall apart pretty quickly. Right. I mean, I've done some stuff, like I can paint and do stuff like that, but anything that's a higher level, it's just not my thing.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And so you're doing some investment stuff. Do you want to shout, like, is this a company that people could be customers of, or is this mostly like your own investment business?
I mean, the way people would be customers is just if anyone in the city, is looking for a place to rent and live at. That's what I do. It's residential real estate.
And how would they find your inventory? And
honestly, if you're looking for a place, just hit my Instagram. I'm kind of like self-managing it right now.
Okay.
I haven't really hired employees or anything like that. So yeah, just hit my Instagram. Usually stuff is.
Go ahead. Sorry. No, go ahead. Finish.
Oh, I was just gonna say. Usually there isn't a ton of stuff vacant, but sometimes they come open, and if you're looking for a place, just ask me.
Okay, because I was gonna say we could probably put your Instagram handle on the screen here where you're talking about. But what is your Instagram? People want to connect with you, regardless of whether it's real estate related or not.
Yeah, well, speaking of that, I'll do one other plug. If you've got cool podcast guests, you think somebody from or it doesn't even necessarily need to be from Salem, feel free to hit my Instagram as well. But it is at the real Matt Cox 4. Had to put that distinction. Lots of parody accounts out there.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine. Now, okay, so wait a minute though. Your podcast is called Saucetown Stories, but you just said you'd take guests that are not from Salem or don't have Salem connections?
In rare instances, I mean, the general theme is Salem. They usually need to have at least some connection to the area. I mean, I've broken that a couple times. Like I had, have you seen the movie? Have you seen the movie War Dogs?
Yes.
Okay, so the guy that Miles Teller plays,
right?
He was on the real life guy, not Miles Teller, but the guy that Miles Teller plays. I had him on because he's my mom's cousin, which I had no clue about until recently, wow. And I was like, I love that movie. I gotta have this guy on.
Yeah,
I kind of broke the rules for that one. Yeah, I mean, for actually, besides that, I think everyone has had at least some sort of tie to the Salem area.
Now, when you break the rules, do you have to get approval from the League of Dons, or is this like something you have veto power over?
The Saucetown Stories podcast is a dictatorship at this point.
Wow.
I have full veto power. Yeah, don't have to run it through the League of Dons anymore.
You're not asking anybody for anything. You just make the decision.
No.
Okay, I respect. That's a power move.
That's a power. I will make that distinction though. Like, it's got to be somebody pretty like. They got to carry some weight to if they have no Salem ties, because that is the theme I'm going for is people from the Salem area or with ties to the Salem area.
Yeah, and have you noticed, because you're taking the opposite approach. You're doing like what the data shows actually will get your podcast some traction. Have you noticed, like, are your numbers going up? Like, have you noticed like more people reaching out to you in your DMs, or when they see you, like, hey, I've been listening to the podcast, like, do you sense that the podcast is growing?
Yeah, I do. I mean, the numbers have climbed. They climb slowly. It's not, I'm not going to get on here and act like I've got some massive podcast. I do think the niche thing, in some regard, just because it's just easier for me to, I guess if I'm not going to be able to reach out to Aaron Rodgers and get him on the podcast, right? Like, so I've really tried to focus on that Salem audience by having people from Salem on. I just think that's what they care about, at least on my pod.
I would, as a former like North Salem type resident, I would like to push back. I mean, it feels like your podcast is heavily South Salem based.
You're right.
I'm wondering, I mean, North Salem has produced some good athletes, some
Jed Lowry, get me Jed Lowry.
Ryan Bailey was an Olympian. Adam McKay. I mean,
yeah,
you've had.
I DM'd Ryan Bailey. He didn't hit me back.
Okay,
if you
all
can,
right.
Set me up. I will be. I would owe you.
All right. I'm just saying. I mean, like, I just feel like there's a lot of South Salem love going on, and
there is. That's fair.
I mean, I just that was an observation, which means that I've listened to a couple of your episodes, so that's a good thing. It's a plus.
I appreciate that, and no doubt there is a South Salem bias. I 100% agree, and I would love to get some more North McKay,
North Salem,
there's been a handful of Sprague, West Salem. Yeah, it is. It's been a heavy South Salem and then a handful of Sprague. So I would love. I should do a better job diversifying it around the city a little bit more.
Okay, all right. I mean, I just was just something I noticed, as a non-South Salem guy, So.
No, I appreciate it. You're totally correct, actually.
all the people listening to South Salem like, screw that guy right now. It's fine. That is what it is. Okay, so last thing, who would be your dream guest? If you're like, whoever would come on, no matter what, they wouldn't say no, who would it be and why?
Okay, I'll give you from the Salem area.
No, okay, give me Salem area, and then give me like just someone you break the rules for.
Yeah, so I'll do one within the rules. I would love to get Abigail Herringer from The Bachelor/Bachelorette on. Okay. I think that episode would break records for sure. And she's doing. I tried DMing her. She's she's got 500,000 Instagram followers. I've even had mutual friends from Salem reach out. So Abigail would be awesome. I'll give you,
Okay.
and then I'll give you a 1A would be John Heater, Napoleon Dynamite,
Okay.
who went to South.
Yeah.
Okay, then let's break the rules.
Wait, I'm surprised because I mean, Heater's like out in the community and stuff. Like I've seen him, like people taking pictures with him and stuff like in the past. So I mean, he seems like, is he not accessible? Have you tried to get him?
Yeah, I mean, I DM'd him, and then I also found his agent and tried calling and emailing him. I have not gotten a response.
Okay.
I know there's people that are mutual. I don't know John. I know that we have mutual friends and connections. So I think that is probably the route I need to try next if I'm going to have him on.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, and now break the rules.
Oh, I mean, probably Aaron Rodgers. I mean, I'm a huge Green Bay Packer fan, and then all the drama this summer around Rodgers. Sure. I would love to have Rodgers on the pod.
Okay. Are you excited he's back?
Oh, hell yeah.
Okay.
Open arms. And
Okay.
I was I thought his behavior was getting it was wearing thin, but at the same time, he's the MVP. Of course I'm stoked to have him back. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay, so plug the pod. Tell people where they can find it. Tell people when to listen, all of that stuff.
Yeah, so please go on Instagram at Saucetown Stories. Please give us a follow there. Also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you listen to podcasts. Go to the search bar, type in Saucetown Stories. I think there's only one of them, but if there's any question, click the one with the Salem Goldman as the icon. Hit subscribe. Give us hopefully 5 stars. If you don't feel that way, give us less than 5 stars. Okay. Write a comment, but mainly just subscribe. And then as far as listening, they pretty consistently come out on Tuesdays. I've been mixing in some Friday episodes as well, but I always share this stuff on the Saucetown Stories Instagram. I share it on my own Instagram as well. But please, follow the Saucetown Stories Instagram because that's where there's more content related to the pod than my personal Instagram.
And that is one thing I think that sometimes people that just listen to the pod don't understand. Like, if they go and follow your Instagram, over time your Instagram builds, and people will check that. Like, if you DM them, like, hey, will you come on the pod? They look to see. If you have 150 or 200 followers like I have, like, it's not impressive. You know what I mean? So, like, if people follow and help you build the audience, you're going to be able to get, you know, bigger guests. I'm not saying better, but bigger guests, you know. And the same thing with the subscribes. Like, if 10,000 people subscribe to your podcast today, you would probably get boosted in Spotify's like recommended or Apple's, you know what I mean? And then once you get there, then people are like, oh, let me check out this pod. And then you have a chance to build an even bigger following. So, you know, the more people that are subscribed and commenting, leaving reviews, that kind of stuff, all of that stuff helps as far as the overall metrics of you being seen. I think sometimes people that, you know, are just listening to podcasts and not really in, like, on the back end, not really paying attention to that kind of stuff. I think sometimes they don't understand, like, how valuable that is to podcast creators like us. So I figured shout out your spot again and kind of explain why you're asking people to subscribe and follow on Instagram.
Oh yeah, I definitely, especially recently, I've been harping on it a little bit. I try not to be too much like, hey guys, help me out. But I've been doing it lately because I think a lot of people, they listen to it, but they don't subscribe. They just they see it on Instagram or Facebook or whatever and just click the link. But if you subscribe, you get the notification when a new episode is out and you help me out a little bit and get my subscribers up.
Yeah. Do you want to shout out like one of your loyal listeners? Where you're like, hey, this person. Man. I'll go while you think. I got Rodney Chuda. He's the man. That dude is always hitting me up like, hey, I like this episode, whatever. So anyway, I'll shout him out. Do you have anybody? Putting you on the spot.
Let me check. I've had a few people in my DMs always complimenting it. Let me pull my cell phone out.
Okay, all right. I put you on the spot. That's my bad.
No, that's cool. I want to get to these people, but I don't want to forget them. I mean, Garrett Brown, always commenting on them.
Okay.
Josh K, always listening, always
Okay.
excited about the guests. Cole Pittman, don't want to forget Cole. Cole's
Okay.
always stoked to listen to it. Man, those are a few just from my DMs. I mean, I was in Salem for actually Coach Defoe's birthday party a few weeks ago, and a bunch of people there were commenting on it, which was cool.
Okay.
Cool to hear that. So
You can, if you remember other people, you can tag them in the post or whatever. We'll get them.
Yeah.
We'll get them.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, it does. It feels good, and you can probably agree, Kevin. I mean, it feels good just to have people text you and be like, "Hey, that was a cool episode. Hey, I enjoyed that."
Huge.
And it doesn't matter if you have
Yes.
1 million followers or 100. Like it feels good to have people compliment your work. So appreciate it.
For sure. Or just to know that someone is appreciating it. And someone's listening. You're like, man, that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
So just have someone say, hey, man, that was good. Is huge for
No
sure.
doubt.
For sure.
Absolutely.
All right. Did I miss anything?
Man, I think you covered everything. This was fun, man. I appreciate you.
Yeah, it
having
was
me
cool.
on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. And it's tough. Like, trying to get guests like there. As soon as I book you, then I'm like, oh shoot, by the way, I got to reschedule. So I thank you for moving the time and showing up and not canceling. So I appreciate that. That was great.
Of course, I try to respect everybody's time, and I know when you rescheduled, you gave me like 3 days notice, so I appreciated that
For sure.
as well. So, thanks, Kevin.
All right. Cool. All right. Well, check out your pod. Follow you on Instagram. And again, man, thanks for being on here. Don't hang up. I'm going to sign off, but thanks for being on.
All right, thanks, Kevin.